What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and today is pretty exciting because this has been one of the most highly requested things that I've ever seen in my own comment section, and that is today we are reviewing some custom Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Now, I've done this in the past. I've looked at some bad cards and some good cards, mostly bad cards though, but in today's video we're pretty much only focusing on cards that I feel are at least pretty competent in their design. I do want to mention here, this isn't an invitation. Please do not send me all of your custom cards on Facebook and Twitter and all those things. In the future, if these first couple of videos I have planned go over well, I will guaranteed set up a contest for you guys to send in your own cards for me to review. But for right now, that's not what I'm doing. I'm just going on duelingbook.com, which has its own way to make your custom cards, and I'm typing in whatever archetype or set of cards that I want to look at, and I'm sort of just pulling them from there. So you don't need to send me your custom cards right now. Stay tuned though, because in the future I will definitely have some contests if these videos go well, where you guys can actually submit your own cards. Now, in today's video, we are not just looking at any custom cards, we are looking at FLUFFAL and FRIGHTFUR cards specifically. I think for these first couple ones, maybe even the future ones, I'm going to review archetypes or a series of cards that I really enjoy, because these are the cards that I can understand from a conceptual standpoint, and the things that I'm looking for here, if we're rating cards on it, we're not really going to rate them on a scale, but the things that I was looking for when I was picking these cards, and we're going to look at some ones that are less good and some ones that are really good, and even I'm going to show you my top pick at the end. We're looking at cards that I feel are balanced and help out the problems of the deck, and also could see print in the future. Obviously none of these cards will see print because they're all custom, but when you look at like my top 3 picks in this video, you'll notice that they all have really good problem solving card text, they have decent artwork, and they're pretty much balanced. And especially for the top pick, it is a card that I could definitely see Konami making something very similar to it if they wanted to release a new FLUFFAL piece of support. So while there are no truly bad cards in today's video, the worst one that I'm going to look at is called FLUFFAL Fusion, and this one, it doesn't have very good problem solving card text, but I did think it was kind of funny because there's a very clear thing that this person is showing, and that's that they hate Ash Blossom. So this thing says, fusion summon one FRIGHTFUR monster by using monsters in your deck. This card cannot be negated by Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. You can only activate this, or you can only activate on FLUFFAL Fusion once per turn. So there's a lot of typos in here, a lot of funny stuff in here, but I thought this was pretty cool. And honestly, I think a FLUFFAL Fusion without the Ash Blossom specific thing, I think wouldn't be like the worst idea ever. Having a sort of Shaddoll fusion effect where you can send them from your deck to the graveyard would be kind of neat. It would probably need some sort of requirement though, and I say that because even though FLUFFALs aren't the most competitive deck, if you give them a card that can just send cards from deck to the graveyard, it might actually be a little bit too scary. So I think this would need, very similar to Shaddoll fusion, some sort of criteria to be met before you can actually do that ability. And obviously a card should not specifically name Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. This isn't an anti-Regeki or anything along those lines. Maybe this thing can say like your opponent can't activate cards in response to this effect, but even that seems a little bit too powerful. We don't need to add a super poly ability to this card. Overall though, I thought this idea was kind of unique, if a bit funny, that they mentioned specifically Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. The next couple cards that I want to look at are cards that I feel are okay in design. Maybe they have 1 or 2 flaws, and also they don't have the best problem solving card text. And I'm not really trying to use the problem solving card text thing as like a huge criteria here for when we're reviewing these cards, but if we are reviewing them from a standpoint of if these cards would actually see print, not only do they have to be balanced, but they also have to be written well. So cards like this probably wouldn't make it into that category, but they're still decent and they have some cool ideas. So the first one is FRIGHTFUR FUNTIME, a Link 2 monster with a bottom left and a bottom right hand pointing arrow. This thing takes 2 or more FLUFFAL, I'll get to that in a second, FLUFFAL or Edge in monsters. When this card is link summoned, special summon one FLUFFAL monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard up to the number of monsters used for this card's link summon. Once per turn, you can add 1 Edgent monster or 1 FRIGHTFUR card from your deck to your hand. So what's the main problem with this card? Well, I don't think the idea of a link monster summoning FLUFFALs from your hand, deck, or graveyard is overpowered. However, the one glaring problem with this card from a design standpoint is that multiple times in its text, it seems to imply that you can use any number of FLUFFAL cards or Edgem cards to summon this thing, when in reality it has to be exactly 2. The reason is that with link monsters, unlike Xyz monsters, which is obviously where this thing is taking inspiration from, you have to use monsters equal to the link rating, and in this case it's 2. So even though this thing technically says it can take 2 or more FLUFFAL or Edgent monsters, it can't actually do that. It can only take 2. You can't just break the link summoning mechanic. As far as the card's actual effect, it's pretty decent, right? I mean, you have a card that immediately recuperates you for your loss because you take the -1 to summon this thing, but then you get a free +2 on summon, and then also you get another free 3+1 just by searching an Edge Imp monster or a FRIGHTFUR card. So obviously, almost 100% of the time, you would go for FRIGHTFUR Patchwork. If you already use that card, maybe you would go for Edge Imp Chain or Edge Imp Sabers. But yeah, that is a lot of pluses on one Link monster, and it's not like the craziest thing. I don't think it's super overpowered. When we're looking at a card like this, obviously it would be insane in a different archetype, but because Fluffals are already kind of on the weaker side, I mean, they're not like terrible, they certainly can win games, a card like this would just boost them quite a bit, maybe into rogue status instead of just being a casual only deck. FLUFFAL Party is a field spell card, so kind of interesting, and I really like this artwork. I'm not sure what it's taken from, but it's pretty funny, and it says this card is treated as toy vendor, so that's kind of interesting. I guess the idea there is that you can pop it with FLUFFAL wings, but this thing has a pretty crazy set of effects here. So it says once per turn you can add one FLUFFAL card from your deck to your hand. If this card leaves the field, special summon one FRIGHTFUR monster from your graveyard. This summon is treated as a fusion summon. So that might not seem too crazy, but there's a couple key things missing from this card's text that make it really broken, even in the context of Fluffals. So the first thing is that none of the effects in this thing are once per turn, and that matters a lot because FLUFFAL Party actually can search itself, which isn't the craziest thing, but you could do a sequence of plays here where you FLUFFAL Party, search FLUFFAL Party, pop it with Wings or FRIGHTFUR Tiger, which is like I think the main thing you're trying to combo with this card, either Wings or Tiger. Tiger can pop your own cards, Wings pops Toy Vendor, and then you can just cycle through all these copies of the FLUFFAL Party. By making this card be Toy Vendor as well, I'm assuming you can set it off of FLUFFAL Bear, at least that's how it was intended to work. So there's a lot of ways to get this card, and as a I mean it says once per turn, but it's a soft once per turn, which means that for each copy you can do it once per turn. That seems a little bit too overpowered, but I think just in general, special summoning FRIGHTFUR fusion monsters from the graveyard, once again, not a hard once per turn ability, is pretty darn powerful because while you won't trigger the effects of things like Tiger, because those actually require you to use it with fusion materials, you will trigger the effects of Sabertooth. So Sabertooth, when it's fusion summoned, special summons a FRIGHTFUR from the graveyard. You could do a ton of crazy OTKs with this card, playing through so many negations. This card is a little bit too good. You could probably put hard once per turn abilities on both of the effects and then also remove the ability for it to be Toy Vendor. That would balance it a little bit more, but I think that that's not really the flavor that this person was going for. Clearly they were trying to have this card be able to be destroyed with Wings, which I don't think is fair enough, even for a deck like Fluffals. FLUFFAL Toy Box, a Link 1 monster, not a Link 2, and it takes one FLUFFAL monster, which is fine. I mean, I wish this card also took an Edge Imp monster, but I can see where they're coming from. And this thing says this monster must be Link summoned and can't be special summoned any other ways. When this monster is Link summoned, you can add one Edge Imp or FLUFFAL monster from your deck to your hand, and then also you contribute this monster to add a Polymerization or a Fusion spell card, except a Fusion Wave Motion from your deck to your hand. Now, where is this card wrong? Well, I don't think this card is terrible. I think it's really good. It might even be a little bit too good, and I know it sounds weird because it is Fluffals, it is a rogue deck, but this card might be pushing the boundaries a little bit too much. When you're trying to balance Link 1 monsters, it is very difficult because yes, we have some crazy Link 1 monsters like Traptrix Sarah is a card, for example, that really boosted a rogue strategy, but when you're boosting a Traptrix deck, that's a much slower controlling deck, where a Fluffal deck is an OTK based strategy. So when you give it a Link 1 monster that not only searches a card on summon, but also contribute itself to search another card, that gets a little bit out of hand in a deck that's already so aggressive and already has a lot of ways to generate a lot of cards. You know, one of the things that Fluffals aren't really lacking is card generation. I mean, it certainly helps when you add it on to these Link monsters. And a Link 1 monster that you very likely are using a Fluffal that already got you a plus, like Dog or Owl or something along those lines, adding 2 more search effects on top of that is a little bit too much for just one normal summon in a deck that can just OTK out of nowhere. Next up, we have FLUFFAL Snake, and I'm pretty sure this artwork is actually from another card, but I'm not entirely sure. But this is a level 4 monster. It is a fairy. It has like small attack and defense points, nothing to write home about, and its effect says you can banish this card from your graveyard, set one Toy Vendor from your deck. If you do, add one FLUFFAL Wings from your deck to your hand. Your opponent takes no damage this turn. So in the graveyard, this thing is pretty crazy. It's like a FLUFFAL Bear that also adds a Wings to your hand. So this thing on its own does get you a lot of pluses, but I think with that effect alone, it would be fine. Where I'm actually sort of asking for a design change on this card, if you were to make it more balanced, is that I think that making your opponent take no damage this turn is too much. I think this card is over-tuned, and I know it sounds very powerful, but you still wouldn't really want to play more than 1 or 2 copies of this card, because the big part of Bear that's really important is that you can just discard it from your hand. It's a starter card, but for FLUFFAL Snake to work, you have have to get it in the graveyard. Of course, if this thing was released alongside that Link 1 monster we just looked at, it would be insane, but as it stands right now, if they just added this card into the game, I'm not really sure if you'd play more than maybe 1 or 2 copies of FLUFFAL Snake, but especially people would not play it, they would never play it if it had that your opponent would take no damage the rest of the turn, because as I've said multiple times, FLUFFALs are an OTK based strategy. We can pretend like you can play a controlling version, and yes, if you went first, this card would be really strong, but a FLUFFAL deck, a FRIGHTFUR deck, built in the most competitive way is not trying to do that. It is just trying to blow up your opponent's entire board and attack for game, and there are a lot of ways to do that, and while I feel this card is cool, I just feel it really goes against the theme of the current era of FLUFFALs. FLUFFALs have always been designed as an OTK based strategy, even from a very beginning. This is not a card that facilitates those OTKs. It actively prevents you from doing that. It's a shame because I do like this card conceptually, except for that one line, but I do feel that one line is big enough to make this card never printed, and also if it was printed, it probably wouldn't be played. And that brings us to the final 2 cards, the second and first place, my top picks for this week, reviewing all of these custom FLUFFAL and FRIGHTFUR cards, and these are cards that meet a lot of marks. They have pretty good problem solving card text. Also, I feel that these cards are balanced while also helping out some of the downsides of the current era of FLUFFAL strategies, and most importantly, I feel that if these cards were printed as real cards, I wouldn't even take a second look. Obviously, their artwork would need to change, but other than that, effect-wise, I feel they're just balanced enough and not overpowered enough, but not underpowered enough to where these cards could be printed by Konami and they would fit right into the modern FLUFFAL strategy. So first off, we have a monster card for the main deck. It is FLUFFAL Monkey, a level 2 light fairy monster, 300 attack, 1000 defense, and this thing says, it's pretty simple, but I think it does solve a lot of issues. It says, when this card is sent to the graveyard for a fusion summon of a FRIGHTFUR monster, banish 1 card your opponent controls, and that is a hard once per turn ability. This card is great. It's not super complicated, but I think that FLUFFAL Monkey is a great example of that. You don't need to make cards super overly complicated to actually make them really, really good. I think this would fit right into the modern FLUFFAL decks. I don't know if you'd play 1 copy or 2 copies. You almost certainly would not play 3 copies because it is a hard once per turn ability and it's not a starter card, but it is a really cool piece of board breaking cards that FLUFFALs, I mean, they can get there once you summon the tiger for a whole bunch of summons, but having a card that can banish an opposing card while you're doing your starting combos is really, really solid for a FLUFFAL deck. I like this card a lot, and I think that some people might not like it because it's not doing anything super outrageous, super crazy. It probably should target your opponent's card instead of just being a non-targeting form of removal. I think that was like the one thing that kept it back from being like the #1 pick, but overall a very fantastic FLUFFAL custom card. And that brings us to my #1 pick this week of all these custom FLUFFAL cards, and that is FLUFFAL Bulldog. Also, the artwork is pretty cool. I don't know if the person drew that or found that somewhere, but it does kind of fit in the theme, and it is, from what I can tell, original artwork. So this is a dark Link 2 monster, 2000 attack, which I feel is right in line with what a Link 2 monster would be. It says that it takes 2 monsters, including a FLUFFAL monster. I think that is very, very cool, because what that means, unlike the other Link 2 we looked at and unlike the Link 1 that we looked at, you can actually summon this thing using non-FLUFFAL or Edgem cards. For example, when I used to have Brilliant Fusion at 3, you would, a lot of times you would Brilliant Fusion for Seraphonite and then summon FLUFFAL Dog, start off your combos that way, but you had to consolidate the Seraphonite and the FLUFFAL Dog into a random Link 2 monster. Having an on-theme Link 2 monster like this one, though, that helps you not only play FLUFFALs, but also combine them with other engines that you can play in your strategy is a really cool idea. This thing says, when this card is Link summoned, you can add 1 Polymerization or Fusion card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Really cool piece of recycling there, as well as a searching ability. And then it says, once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster on the field, move that monster to another of the main monster zone or the field of that target's controller. This card can attack directly if it is the only monster in its column. So there's a couple of different ways that you can use that movement ability, and I do feel that it could be a quick effect. That'd be kind of a cool form of interruption against your opponents, but as a non-quick effect, there are still a bunch of ways you can use it. One way you can use it is by moving cards that you summon to where this thing points to other zones to allow you to summon more cards from the extra deck. Or you could move this thing out of the extra monster zone to maybe steal a win, because this thing can then attack directly for 2000, which is pretty decent. I should also mention, because this thing is treated as a FRIGHTFUR card, it does get the boost from a couple of the other FLUFFAL and FRIGHTFUR cards out there that boost FRIGHTFUR monsters. That's pretty cool as well. I think I actually missed that part when I was first reading the effect, so sorry about that, but overall I feel this card does fit right in with how FLUFFALs are played and what a FLUFFAL Link monster realistically would would look like. It's not going to be super overpowered. It's not going to get you like 2 searches off of 1 summon, but it does have a cool search ability. I think that this person made the right call with not allowing this card to search a monster card. I think that FLUFFALs already do that enough. I think that searching the polymerization is the right way to go, as well as a fusion card. You can search the FRIGHTFUR fusion, you could search Brilliant fusion if you wanted to. I like this card a lot, so kudos to the person that made this FLUFFAL. Anyway though, that's pretty much going to wrap up today's discussion video, these reviewing these custom cards. Like I said at the beginning, you don't need to send me, please don't send me all of your custom cards like immediately. I know that a lot of people still will, even though I opened and ended the video by saying don't do that, but really if you're trying to get in one of these future installments, sending them to me now is not the right way to do it. If these videos do well, if I see people talking in the comment section and having a good time watching me review these custom cards, I promise in the future I will do a video where you guys can submit your own custom cards, then I'll review them in a later video. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you want to see any changes. Should I look at more bad cards as well? I mean, there certainly were bad cards out there, but a lot of the times I don't know if that's like a little kid writing them or something. I mean, the first one I feel like was like a little kid, but I thought that one was not like too bad, but it was just funny enough to like talk about in the video. But just let me know any feedback you guys have for this format of reviewing custom cards, as well as some archetypes that I could look at in the future that I personally like a lot. I'll see you later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.